one thing I wanted to sort of start with was, we all know that you've been very, very engaged with the Films Division archive, and this film also begins with the archive. And I was wondering whether for you, did the journey sort of, in a way, was it motivated by your engagement with Films Division, and how did that sort of feed into the way you were, seeing the, from the conceptualization of the film to how it sort of evolved finally?
Yeah, thanks, Anu. I mean, definitely my entire engagement with this entire process of culture creation, and mainstream culture creation, and especially as reflected in Films Division films. What is an ideal citizen, and what is the image of a culture that you're creating by making your films, which then goes down to Doordarshan later, and then private media, and more the online space now has that. Many of the underlying thoughts here are coming from that entire engagement. So how has China come to us? Apart from all the martial arts films and everything, through propaganda films and through everything that came out in the news or popular images. So for me, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to visit China as part of the festival and look at these images again, images that have come to us, mediated through and produced by these entire systems of cultural image creation, and especially in the case of China, as approved of by the state. So starting by those images of the Cultural Revolution with Mao, and starting with the propaganda image collector Liu Debao, who completely believes in in Mao, in the Cultural Revolution and the images of that time as a time that was ideal and most egalitarian and just and so on. So starting with that, and then the entire journey, especially with our connection with China post liberalization, where China became this aspirational figure for us in terms of its development, in terms of its urban development, and so on, which is something that Wu Julian talks about later. But yeah, maybe I'm jumping too many steps, so I'll come back later.
No, that's fine, please feel free. But a couple of things that really intrigued me, and there are two sort of questions. One is about what people are saying, and the second is about how you choose to treat that. So I'll go with the first one. And so this idea of the image object, which I found really fascinating, especially with, for like at least the last decade, we've been sort of hearing about Shanghai as sort of the ideal that we should all aspire to. So in that sense, I thought that was really fascinating. So do you want to sort of talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, if you look, if at least the people that we met, which is not at all the, let's say, the mainstream of China, where, you're talking to these people who are working in the field of film and in the field of culture and are critiquing this entire image creation, where they say that Shanghai is an image object, and you see it, and it is, it is, because 6 p.m. every evening, the church bell rings, and, the entire facade at the river gets lit up. The entire heritage precinct, and across from that heritage precinct, the entire area of Pudong, which is the more recently developed business district with all these spectacular buildings which get lit up, and this entire light show happens for the public to look up to, and for a spectacle for all visitors to look at, is the kind of thing that we've been fed since the late 90s, and we continue to be fed. So it was a very, very immediate connect, very immediate connect at that, and other things that you probably never get to see. I mean, even, we're visiting as tourists, as maybe cultural tourists, and so on. And there are many things that, we will never, like, let's say it's very hard for any foreigner to be able to, or why foreigner? For most of us to, let's say, talk about the reality of India. What is the reality? There are multiple realities, and so on. So you go with what comes your way, and I decided to limit myself to that, to the role of somebody who's come from the outside, and I'm responding to these tourist spaces. I'm responding to these images that have come to us, been given to us, by China, and what's been projected in India as something that we need to be.
Yeah, so actually that's related to what I was going to ask you next, is in terms of your own position, and you're saying it was, as an outsider, but I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about why you choose exactly that distance in a way from your subject. Because you're, like I was mentioning it to you yesterday when we were talking informally as well, that when you go to a new space, that sort of just that human contact of just running into somebody randomly, or that kind of thing is totally absent. There is this kind of distance of observation and of the interview mode.
Sure.
And the film sort of sticks to that very, very sort of consciously. And I was wondering whether there was any reason for that, or if you can sort of...
We never made any attempt to go beyond that, because I said, okay, this is the screen that I'm going to use for this film. These are the images that have come to us, and I'm going to respond to them. So we did try some vox pops, just talking about Indian culture and films and stuff. But finally we took them out of the edit because it wasn't really adding very much to the film. And again, those were vox pops. It was not really trying to make any deeper connect. So we said, okay, we are going to have this screen between us and what we're looking at. So there was no... And who are our so-called characters in the film? It is people from West Heavens and people who were involved in the festival. So, of course, these are as real as anybody else, but there's not really a person on the street or anybody else that, we engaged with. So, and this was made, and the person you see there, my friend Rohan, we visited in 2014 December and 15 January, because he's an architect and part of an architecture college, which also had exchange programs with West Heavens, looking at Bombay and Shanghai, So again, that's something that did not make its way into the film, but we did explore that. But we chose to limit ourselves to the cinematic image and the image of the city, which then informs the image of a culture.
Is also, there are so many sort of things that are just touched upon, and then you just sort of leave it. Like the thing about nostalgia without history, and many moments like that in the film where something is touched, and then you just sort of don't take it forward, but you jump to another thing. So again, is that sort of as a form where you sort of very consciously trying to do that from the beginning, or did sort of things happen as you were shooting and sort of people were sharing their own ideas, and so it just happened like that?
No, I mean, in many ways, those, like they say that before you start an interview, you usually know the answers. So you ask your questions in a particular way, and of course you add to that. Things get added, or things might not go that particular way. So that was pretty much the thought behind, visiting the Beijing Film Academy, where that interview happens, and he's talking about cinema and the country. And this entire image of the city, where he says it's all nostalgia without past. It's not nostalgia only for the present. And for me, the kind of things that make their way into the film are the kind of things that we in India have an immediate connect with, where you choose to not analyze, you choose to not look, and you look only at with a very, very short memory, only at what happened today, or only at what happened in last week, and so on, as propagated by your media, and as the things that become the mainstream voice for a short period of time at that point of time, and then you move on. So, which is why that was a pertinent statement for me,
So in a way, you're sort of just setting us off with that one comment, and then the rest we can sort of carry forward in our own imagination and our own realities, actually.
Yeah, I mean, leave you with a lot of questions, and also that it's all very fine to say that India and Indian culture needs to be at a particular point of time, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and completely trying to dismiss the kind of historical perspective behind it, and why things are the way they are, why things are complicated, what are the reasons behind them, and so on, where, as you can see, we can just brush it aside and make a Shanghai out of our lives, So therefore that clip from Chandni Chowk to China, and the one song which didn't again make it into the cut, which I found very fascinating. I watched that film in the context of making that film, this film. The song is from Chandni Chowk to China, Main Kaun Hu Samajh Aaye Na, so which I found pertinent in this case. Anyway.
So if there are comments and questions, I'm sure Mukul will be happy to take them. Yeah, can we have the mic? Yeah.
This is just out of curiosity. There is a man who is talking about Jia Jhanke, and he says, let's not talk about it anymore. And it always fascinates me because there is a contradiction even in the way you show Eiffel Tower and that whole world, and how Diàn-yïng has also shown that world.
Absolutely.
And behind the scene of that.
Yeah.
So I wonder what were your thoughts about it? Because this man obviously has seen the contradiction of Diàn-yïng, and he doesn't want to say it, but he has already given us a link about it.
No, so what ends up happening is that very, very often filmmakers like Diàn-yïng become the Satyajit Ray. You know, India was raised to India, Diàn-yïng becomes that for China, where that is the alternative image of the contradictions of this fast developing country that Diàn-yïng presents. Films are produced by and approved of by the state. And if you look at the films of Diàn-yïng, there's a lot of resignation, there's a lot of sense of despair, but never anger. So, you know, you say, okay, this is the way we are, and this is how we are badly affected by the dams that we're constructing and so on. And that thing that the film that you're talking about, which is The World by him, and one sequence in this film is shot at the World Park in Beijing, where, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but it is coming back to Diàn-yïng. Because of that, if you mention Diàn-yïng to Chinese filmmakers, it's, you know, it's again that Ghatak, Ray, Cham Benegal kind of, let's say, very mainstream idea of what India might stand for and the problems within that, you know. So that's what he says, that, you know, look, those films also are majorly problematic, and let's not talk of him anymore.
I asked two questions, since there don't seem to be any others at the moment. One was, you start with a voiceover, and the kind of information you give in that could have been text. So why did you choose a voiceover, and why do you abandon that mode in the film? And the second question is, why didn't you use any footage of the actual West Heavens project, the screenings, the interaction, the debates that must have occurred?
Yeah, that's something I'll answer your second question first. I worked with for a long period of time, in fact struggled with for a long period of time, because given the duration of the film, you know, it was difficult to use something of substance. You know, it ended up becoming montagey, where you're touching upon things but not really getting into them. And it was also, the film changed, you know. I mean, as I revisited and started working on this, I did have sections where those bits were included, but somehow even formally and in terms of flow, they were not really integrating with the rest of the film. It's shot by various people, shot on all kinds of cameras and formats. Audio may or may not be usable or good, and so it was very distracting. So, but what happens is that the version that let's say there are two versions. So the shorter version, which a PSBT has or will have, is a 30-minute version that has some footage of the festival. Here, I just decided not to keep it. And about the voiceover, this film has gone through many, many changes. There have been versions with text and not voiceover. Finally, we ended up using voiceover. And at some point, I finished saying what I had to. And, you know, again, my way of relating with something is through the image being primarily, you know, I'm starting with something as somebody who makes images. And so after this fellow finishes saying that it's about anger, it's about, you know, we documentary filmmakers feel responsible, but sometimes I wonder what, you know, that really leads to. It goes into these short sequences of observation of spaces within China, and I leave the viewers with that. So yeah, maybe in that regard, I don't have a closing and concluding voiceover, but I leave people with those images of first school children, again, which is a cliche that comes to us through many Chinese films that have come through to us over the years, cute Chinese kids doing cute things and so on, in the Hutong working class residential areas of Beijing. Then the CCTV, China Central Television building designed by Rem Koolhaas in Beijing, which is that crazy glass structure. Followed by this phenomenon of square dancing, where people get together in a square, and it's a community activity where you could be dancing to popular music, or you could be performing Tai Chi together. So you do this, and so that last sequence is what I leave people with.
I just to follow up on Reena's comment about the voiceover, because in the beginning it's more about just giving the information about how you happen to be in China and what your experience was.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering about the part when Rohan is being photographed, and then this comment that explains it to us or explains your take. And just in this viewing particularly, I was sort of wondering whether it would have been better without that comment, because
Which comment?
When you say that it's interesting how we get associated with the cultural icons and so on. So, and I was just wondering whether we could have just sort of let it be and just experience that.
It's also it's also a film for the MEA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's PSPT and
some
MEA,
of it
and
is
it's
overstated because of that, perhaps.
Yeah. So because like I said, it went through a lot of back and forth, and there were certain things that I wanted, which I agreed to do.
Yes.
So the voiceover was one of those things. I said, fine, it's okay. It doesn't really take away that much from the film, so it's okay.
Sure. Yeah, Usha.
Thank you for a very lovely film. It was great fun watching it. And my question, I don't know if it's a question, but maybe we can talk about it at some point. But it's a very interesting film because your point of entry into the film is response to images, and you're creating your own images of those very same spaces that have come to us. Whether it's a Tiananmen Square or a Shanghai waterfront. But I'm just asking, did you at any point at all feel tempted to do something naughty there, to subvert things, so that you create in a sense, we also see these beautiful images of the city. So I'm just wondering whether you felt tempted to do something with it that kind of makes it possible to see these things in a different way. I don't know if I'm saying anything.
No, the naughtiest thing, according to me, I do is don that costume and fly over these landscapes, where I appropriate those images. I mean, somebody else said it's a Hanuman act you do over Chinese landscapes. And so all the mainstream kitschy calendar images of China, where I step into a room which is just a blue cube with cameras absolutely everywhere, above, beside, and there are monitors which you can look at. You see yourself keyed against this playback with the music, and they keep telling you, look here, look there, and so you do all that, and so that is the naughtiest and in some way subversive thing that you do, where I perform, I enter that thing and. You be part of it. But beyond that, maybe in some juxtapositions where you are talking of cultural stereotypes and using them, like going from the entire thing of the China girl, which is part of a film strip, to Helen doing Mera Naam Chim Chinchu, to going to Lawrence, and if Lawrence wasn't a close friend, I might have thought twice, about doing it. Again, forever twisting and turning these ideas of what is Chinese and what is not Chinese and what is Indian and so on.
I'm not aware, and I was wondering if you would be aware of anybody who has effectively shown the difference in governance between China and India, because having lived in Hong Kong for 20 years, I can see that Chinese governance is far better for the people than the governance of this particular country, where I am right now.
Shown meaning shown on film? I wouldn't know. But I mean, if you're talking about Chinese documentary, there's the filmmaker in there who says that we can't show the reality, we can't tell the truth. So and even if we do, we can't show our films. So the question to the filmmaker later was that, don't you guys get tired of performing yourselves? Like we very often are made to perform a slumdog millionaire-ness or an IT giant-ness or this yoga-ness or whatever-ness, don't you get tired of performing this culture which is completely censoring, oppressive and all of that? And that is when he gets angry and he says, let's not talk about Diàn-yïng, please, and
So you haven't kept the question.
What kind of engagement do you anticipate the film will, what kind of conversations will it spurn there in terms of your representation of China and their culture?
It would be very interesting. I mean, I wouldn't know because we'll have to see that when it happens. But I mean, the one thing, of course, is that PD will distribute it in its own circuits, and they have a shorter version. This one we'll have to see, because the thing is that you could, like he says, you can screen it in small fora, small venues, and seminars and conferences and stuff. But film festivals need very clear approval from the state, and you have to get city-wise censor clearance. So which we had to do too for You Don't Belong, where it was very interesting, where the strangest of films would get knocked off. India 67 of Sukhdev's got knocked off for Beijing. Shamul Karmakar's I Am the Very Beautiful got knocked off for some other city. And then you go with the flow. It's in 4 cities, some things get screened somewhere, some things don't get screened. So that's something that we'll deal with when we have to. But the kind of response this might get, I don't know, it'll be, I haven't really thought about it yet. So,
not just in the context of your film, but largely globally, this whole stereotype of China being the most repressive state ever, especially in terms of cultural freedom. I was just wondering, a small question, if while getting the footage which is incorporated in the movie, you had to at some level with some authority declare that you are taking footage, or you just shot it as a tourist and got away with it, or how did you get the footage?
No, we shot as tourists. We landed up there, and this is something I checked, that should I apply for a journalist visa or something. I said, please don't bother, because then it'll take 6 months for you to get clearances and stuff. So please go, shoot, it's okay, and of course do it within limits and come back. So you make the best of what you have. So, yeah.
I'm just going to ask one last question. Yeah. This West Heavens project, in which all the Indian films were shown there, has there been any effort to have Chinese films in India as well?
Yes. This happened last year when they brought a set of Chinese films which were screened as part of a package at the Kochi Biennale. So that is something that Ashish is working on, and and again, I think they're doing something at the next Kochi Biennale, so I have a strong feeling that films are going to be a part of that. But many of these films are available and accessible, and so, I mean, if somebody is willing to show them, if somebody is interested in showing them, it can easily be done.
The Chinese films, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much, Mukul.
Thank you. Bye.